Chapter 3. Life and Death of the Master Omraam Mikhaël Aïvanhov. Personality and individuality. So I will try in this chapter to sum up a bit the life of the Master Omraam. But today I'm going to do it a bit differently because I am with two people who can react at one point and maybe ask a question. Like this, it will be a chapter that will be a little bit more live. Story to change a little bit the presentation. So, to sum up the story about the life of the Mr. Omraam, I can speak about some events that happened in his life. I will do a little bit. But before that, I have to present the main thing that is the key of the existence of a being like this, and the key also of the darkness of a being like this, because he has been suffering a lot as well because of the same presentation. What am I talking about? It's about the personality and the individuality. What is the personality? The personality is coming from the Greek, and it means mask. It's coming from the word persona, that means mask. When you're in the theater, you have a personage that we're going to play. It's coming from persona, the mask. In the past, in Greece, people were playing something in a theater, and they were wearing a mask. And at the end, when they were ending the show, they were taking off the mask to bow the public with a real face. Before that, they were just somebody that they were playing. And that is the origin of the word persona. In our society, when you have a lot of personality, you're super cool, while in fact you're just wearing a mask. And this mask is what we call the ego. The ego shouldn't be an opposition to the soul that we have as well. But unfortunately in this society it became an enemy, the opposite. Why? Because when we learn the ego, that is the accumulation of the savoir-faire, of the know-how, we are going to learn also the craziness. We are going to learn the traumas. We are going to learn the limitations, what is forbidden, the religion. So many things that are completely unproductive and incoherent. And all of this is going to be your complete mask. And to look cool in the society, you must have a look that is super cool. A complicated, sophisticated, incoherent and unproductive mask. That's what we're going to describe as being a cool personality. In front of this, you have the individuality. The individuality could be translated by the soul, but would be a short translation, incorrect translation, because it's coming from the word indivisible duality. What does it mean? It means that the ego, the savoir-faire, the know-how, is going to be in alignment, in peace, in harmony with the soul. And that's why two things are becoming one. Indivisible duality becoming one. That's the individuality. It means that I have a soul, that this soul is able to choose, which the ego is not able to do. But the soul is not always able to do things because it doesn't have the knowledge. Then we're using our savoir-faire, our ego. And we're going to do things. And while we want to do things, I'm going to use my hands and my arms to do things. It is as if I wanted to scratch my face, and I punch my face. And I'm bleeding after that. You would say this guy is completely crazy. Instead of scratching his cheek, he's been punching his cheek. That's exactly what the ego is doing. You ask the ego to protect your love and the interests of your life, and it's going to destroy everything. So the ego that should be the prolongation of your soul is the enemy of your soul, as if your arms and hands would be the enemies of your existence. The individuality means a correct alignment and peace and harmony between the soul, the ego, and even your hands and arms. In the life of today, the ego became completely separated and even opposite to your soul. Therefore, it's a war. It's the complete war. sorry, when you are a master of the real knowledge of the state of humanity, of each one in our society, you have to speak seriously with the ego, with the persona, with the mask, with the clown. And we have to be serious with baboons. The baboons are the monkeys, the apes, that have been learning to be productive, to pick up the bananas and the peanuts. And when you are a master, you have to speak with people who are absolutely, totally incoherent. And when your ego is alone, you are totally incoherent. You are completely lost. You are in the complete duality. You want to love, but you hate. You want to be buffy, but you don't practice. You want to be fit, but you eat like a pig. You want to be accepted by the others, but you are aggressive. You want to have money, but you cannot work, and so on. And this being, so unproductive and the complete duality, wants to speak equally with the master. And here we start the joke. It's a joke, but it's also a dark joke. So I will give an example. For instance, a long time ago, some people had decided to build a house for the Master Omraam. So they had a meeting with the Master Omraam, and they said, we have a plan. We want to build that like this room here, there, and there, and there. And the Master Omraam said, no, because I would like to use different matter to build the house. I want to use a different architecture. We could do that like this and like that. And the people who were there, they said, well, what you're asking is complicated. It's a bit complicated. Okay, we will check. They come back 1 month later, and they present exactly the same plans. They tried to improve, most probably. They forgot what he wanted to go, and they went back exactly to the same conclusion. And they come back 1 month later, presenting exactly the same thing. And there, the master is looking at that and said, it's exactly what I wanted. And there's the personal secretary, she's there, her name is Blagos, and she spoke with the Master Omraam after that. She said, but I don't understand, I've been presenting exactly the same. A month ago you said no, now you say it's exactly what you wanted. And he said, when you do stupidities, you have to go to the bottom of the stupidity. Because he knows that we cannot speak in a clever way with the ego. As long as the ego is the ego, you have to manage with that. But the paradox of the being like Omraam or some other masters is that they try to push people to be completely with the individuality. But they have to deal all the time with the personality. How do you recognize a personality? A personality is incoherent, illogical. It's saying the opposite of what it said half an hour before or the day before. And it's a lot in the appearances. I have a student, for instance, who came one day bored. And I said, oh, why are you bored? And he said, because you are. I want to look like you. And I said, you're completely stupid. And if I put a carrot into my ass, you do it as well. And I said, if you want to learn from me, be intelligent, be free, be independent. Don't try to copy what I look like. Try to behave in a free way. And I remember that one day I was in the Bonfin, in the school of Omraam, and I met a guy who was the complete clone of Omraam. But the complete clone, the same beard, the same haircut. It was really impressive, you know. And he called me. And he was like doing a caricature of the master. And he said, yes. So, yes. So, how many years have you been working with the master now? And I said, well, it's about, I don't know at that time, 2 or 3 years. I said, 2 years or 3 years. And, yes, 2 years. Yes. Myself, I must say, more than 35 years, yes. 35 years. It's, yes, such a time, 35 years, yes. And he wanted me to kneel down in front of him, to be the copy of Omraam. 35 years, it's so impressive. That's what the ego wants. So I just tapped gently on his shoulder, and I said, yeah, what can I say? Some people are quicker than some others to learn. And I went away. And he was disgusted. He looked at me like, you bloody fucking idiot, don't you understand? And when I said this story to Omraam, he was laughing so much. He was crying. Because that is funny. Because I'm not serious. How do you want me to be serious with egos? How do you want me to be serious with personalities? They're jokes. You start to exist and to deserve the serious explanations of stuff only when you start to be with individuality, when you start to be in alignment between your soul, your ego, and your actions. When you start to have a straight line in that, you start to be able to face a serious conversation. But before that, what is it? Just a joke. It's just a joke. One day, Omraam went to Canada, and there he's going to meet the White Brotherhood, his school. But it happens that in the school they have a disagreement. So there are two teams, and each team estimates to be the real section. The other one is the bad section. So they argue. And when the master is arriving in Canada, he has to choose. He's facing two delegations at the same time. Two helicopters waiting for him. Where does he go? So, of course, he has to choose one. So he's going to choose one. But it's just a cinema of the egos. So he's going to choose one, and he's going to take the head of the real section, and he's going to say, I trust you, you are the head of the real section. So the real delegation. So I'm going to ask you to wait in this office. You have a telephone, and I will call you when I need something. I want you to wait, and I trust you. I know that you can do that. And the man is so proud. He's in charge of the Master Omraam. He's in the office with his telephone, waiting for the call. And of course, Omraam is not going to call. And he's going to meet the other group and to play with that. So the other one is boiling because he's hosting the Master Omraam, but Omraam goes to see the other group. And at one point, the guy cannot stand anymore. So at one point, he goes to do some other stuff because he's really angry. And of course, the Master Omraam is calling to ask for something. And then he's convoking the guy, and he's saying, only one thing that I ask, only one thing. And you're not there. I'm so disappointed. So he was just playing with the egos. You play the game and so on. He was playing with the ego. But it was not only a game. It was also hell, a nightmare. For instance, later on, in the same place, the two groups are coming to pick up the Master Omraam to do something, whatever it was. And they arrive at the same time, like in a film of cowboys. In the same street, just in front of the house, they arrive, two groups facing each other. And they start to argue. We take the Master. No, we take the Master Omraam. And they argue and argue more. And they argue so much that they start to fight, physically. And the animosity is turned into aggressivity. And they fight. And the Master Omraam is arriving on the balcony at the first floor. And he's shouting, you behave like starving dogs, like beasts. I will go with no one there. And he's going back to the house. And everybody is stopping and everybody is leaving. And in the evening, I had a friend of mine, Augusta, who was traveling with the Master Omraam, and she had a very tiny house in the garden. And in the night, at 3 o'clock, she sees the Master Omraam who is walking in the garden. So she goes, and she says, Master, do you want a tisane, a tea, something? And when she's arriving, he's turning back to her, turning towards her, and he's crying. He has a lot of tears in his eyes. And he's looking at her, and he's saying, they will never understand anything. They will never understand anything. And she stays flabbergasted without a word, and he's turning back and going away, crying. And, of course, he was talking about the disciple. And when I said this story to a lot of people in the Bonfin, in the school of Omraam, they say, no, it's not true. The Master Omraam is above that. But if he's above that, he's not even talking to you, fucking assholes. He doesn't care about you. If he's crying, it's because he loves you. He loves the disciples, and he wants them to be better. And when he looks at them behaving like this, he's ashamed. He's deeply ashamed. He's terrified. So it was a joke, but it was also hell, because he tried to push people to wake up. And I met some people who woke up, let's say 3 or 4 on 1,000. So it's 0.1% or something like this. So some did, but so few. And he had to deal with the general situation of so many people who were so unbearable because they were doing that and they were doing that. And it was so hard. So hard. And Omraam was able to be very psychic, and he used his abilities to play with the egos, to panic the egos, because panic the ego is a way to help this mask to fall down, to react. So I remember a cook, he always had a problem because they had to prepare the food, and while the food was cooked, the Master Omraam was doing a conference. But the conference could be of 1 hour, but sometimes of 3 hours. So the cook, he never knew when to cook and so on. So the master was doing a conference. Then at the end, he was saying a sentence, like a sort of benediction, and enjoy your meal. So some people talk to the cook, and they said, but it's easy. The Master Omraam, he always speaks at least 1 hour. So you start cooking, let's say, after 50 minutes of the conference. Like this, you are more or less in the time. And the cook said, oh yes, that's a good idea. Why didn't I think of this before? That's a really good idea. So he organized everything like this. He said, okay, we're cool, he's arriving and so on. And this day, the master, who is not aware, is arriving, is sitting down, and he says, well, today, enjoy your meal. And in the kitchen, and they were running everywhere and so on. You have 800 people waiting for the food that is not ready, you know. And he did that all the time. So it was really hard to handle the situation with him because he was playing like this. And he always tried to make fool of people. Not of people, of the ego. That is to say, for most of the people, the ego. The ego is always right to be arrogant. The ego is always right to be a liar. The ego is always right to betray. The ego is always right to say the opposite of what he said 2 hours before. So how do you talk with somebody who is saying the opposite of what he said 2 hours before, 3 hours before? How do you have a coherent conversation with entities like this? And that is the situation of the world. You have people that are in the love, they respect the planet, but they eat meat. And you say, yes, but then if you love and so on, I mean, animals bleeding and dying, and doesn't disturb you. Oh no, that's different because, and they start something. What are you talking about? You said that you love the planet, you love the love, but you eat meat. What are you talking about? And that's the situation of the planet, the situation of the people. And it's like this all the time. At the end, they wanted the Master Omraam to be a god. And Master Omraam never said that he was a god, but everybody wanted him to be a god. So at the end, when he was very old, 85, he started to develop a cancer. And it's really impressive because the people, they want to deny that he had a cancer. Before the death of Blagos, the personal secretary of the Master Omraam, they asked her to sign a letter where she declared that he never had a cancer. Because to accept that the Master Omraam had a cancer is very bad. It's not cool for the presentation. They need to worship a person like this. I have seen in a place in Montpellier, it's a place in France, where the Master Omraam came one day. He ate in the center, and they have on a window show the plate, the fork, and the spoon that he used. Like, he's a god, he touched this spoon. Look, it's marvelous. The glass, he has been touching the glass. It's not what he's been touching, but how to act, how to evolve. Not adoring and keeping protected the plate that he used. This is so pitiful, lamentable. So at the end of his life, when he started to develop a cancer, they denied the cancer. They refused to call a doctor for him. They refused to give him tablets against the pain. Because he's not ill, he's a god. He's not ill. And the master knew, because in around September, he said to Blagost, he said, I'm going to travel the day of Christmas. I want to travel the day of Christmas. So Blagost turned to Omraam and she said, Master, you cannot travel the day of Christmas, It's complicated. Nothing is working the day of Christmas. How do you want to travel this day? Yes, sir. You're right, sister. You're right. But it doesn't matter. I will travel the day of Christmas. And Blagost, she just thought, he's a bit old. He doesn't realize. And in fact, he died the 25th of December. So he's been traveling the day of Christmas, in spite of everything being closed. So in September, he knew exactly the day of his departure. But in spite of this, he suffered a lot, because he was surrounded by egos, by clowns who had decided that Omraam was not a human, that he was not suffering. And they refused to call a doctor, not reveal to the public that he was ill, which is his right when you are 86. And they asked Blagost to lie and to sign a paper where she declared that he never died of a cancer, that he was never ill, that one day he just left his body. That's all. Well, that's what people want to believe. That's what the baboons, the clowns, the masks want to believe. But the reality is different. Because when you're surrounded only by clowns, only by masks, by baboons who are arrogant and stupid, trying to copy the master in his look, but not in his teaching, his knowledge, in his tasks, then, believe me, after a long time, you develop a cancer. And you lose your energy to live and to enjoy. Because it has been so heavy, so complicated, so boring, so suffocating to be with people who are saying the opposite of what they said 3 hours before. That is really the thing to understand. In fact, you have to understand that instead of being a weathercock, you are an astral cock. It means that each time that the wind of the astral is blowing, you are going to turn right, left, east, west, north, south, because you are unstable. You are completely unstable. While your soul is very stable. Your soul knows where she wants to go, what she wants to do, what she wants to attend. And the ego is only the domestic, the servant that is helping the master, the soul, to do things. But if you ask the servant to decide, the ego, then one day the ego is deciding that, and 3 hours later the opposite, and after that the opposite of the opposite of the opposite of the opposite. That is exactly the situation of the world, and nothing else. So to be an individuality, a soul in the middle of masks, of disciples who want to copy the master, to have the same haircut, the same beard, and so on. This is so difficult, so demotivating. And then when you wake up in the morning, you don't know who you are anymore. If you are meeting yourself or somebody else, because you face the same face, You meet the same face, the same beard, the same haircut, the same, or am I me or am I the other one? You know, it's. So I'm joking about this, but it's the only thing that you can do. And that's why anyone who has been learning on a high level, very often we will make fool of people. Because if we know that within yourself dwells a fantastic power of love and light, we know that most of the time we are not facing this light, we are facing the clown of the ego that took the control instead of only staying the servant, the domestic of the master of the house, that is the soul. So when you look at this situation, of course that the Master Omraam suffered a lot. I don't say that he was perfect, because when you go high, very high, you have some other enemies that we'll discover later on. But still, it's clear that Omraam was very clear about some ideas, some practice, and he had to face people who were always changing, always saying the opposite of the opposite of the opposite. A long time ago, I met a guy, Olivier Martin, who, of course, like everybody in the Brotherhood, is the reincarnation of the Master Peter Denov, and he was so lost and so arrogant. He had decided to publish some books. He hadn't yet done it, but he wanted to publish some books. And later on, I heard that he did that. And personally, when I heard that he did some books and so on, I really thought, oh, that's cool. He did what he wanted to do, and he's publishing some books about the Master Peter Denov, and it's fine. And one day, I saw a conference from Olivier Martin, more or less now, or old of some years, and I was so ashamed for him. He is doing a pitiful, lamentable imitation of the Master Omraam. Olivier Martin is not existing. Olivier Martin is just copying, trying to play the same thing. And each of us, we are what we are. We should be with the light that is unifying each of us. But we shouldn't try to imitate the appearances, the protection, the body, the ego, the mask. We should do everything to be in peace and in harmony with the light that very high is the same light, the same consciousness. But what we are is different for each of us, and what we are is nothing, only the domestic that is ready to do everything to serve the Master, the light, the soul. And being an individuality in the middle of personalities, it is very, very, very tough. Tough to the point of really giving up at one point. Personally, I was in contact with him by telephone from time to time, and I saw that he was getting more and more down, and he was answering less and less. And then he disappeared completely. I didn't know if he was traveling or not, and let's say 6 months later, 8 months later, I heard that he was dead. And when I heard that he was dead, I thought, oh shit, I was supposed to work with him, I should have been there, and so on. But just too late. And for me, it was very hard to be on the side of the Master Omraam, because to be on the side of the Master Omraam was to be on the side of all these clowns who were arrogant and manipulating, and so I did my best not to be with them, because it was so heavy. The price was so high to pay, to have the pleasure to be with Omraam. Omraam was enjoying TV, was enjoying John Wayne, the westerns, the films, even how is it called? When you fight. Wrestling, exactly. He loved the wrestling. 3 or 4 people fighting. He was laughing so much because it's never very serious. He loved that. And when you have the people that, no, the master was non-violent. Yeah, he was not for the blood, but he was for the enjoying the life all the time. And for instance, when he died, the Bonfim became something very cold. And before that, he was always putting Tyrolean musics because he loved that. He found that very funny. And he was putting a lot of that, and he found that, he said, that's full of life, that's full of joy, you know. And now it's always New Age, but he was not at all like this. So on many things, he was going against the will of the masks, the will of the disciples, you know, who were around Master Omraam, to oblige him to be a clown. They said, you're a master, but we know what you have to do. So you are going to behave like a clown. And he was saying, no, I am a free being. So he was always fighting with the people. And since the conferences that are today existing on the internet, or the books that they wrote, they have been deleting a lot of stuff. They have been censoring a lot of these texts. Because they say, here, the Master Omraam was really a master. Here, he was wrong. We don't speak like this to the public, that is out of topic, that he shouldn't say, blah, blah, blah. So in fact, the Master Omraam was very angry against the Bible because the people, the Catholics, they took only what they wanted from Jesus Christ. And he was always revealing to the people, the Bible is only what is left from the Jesus Christ, because he spoke much more, he taught much more things. He was going much deeper in everything. But now they do exactly the same with him, because they think, well, when he spoke about that, when he said that, when he was angry there, when he was making fool of this, that's not a real master. I remember that one day he read poetry in front of us, and he found that so ridiculous, that he was laughing so much he was crying. Now he's never going to put that online, because he's not respectful. In fact, he was just saying that's not poetry, that's a joke. You know, it's just a joke. The guy is playing with some words, and so what? It's clever, it's very clever, but that's not poetry. Poetry is to stimulate the soul, to stimulate the desire to go higher, to evolve, and so on. That has nothing to do with poetry. That is just a clever way of writing, and sometimes even very funny. So, of course, they are never going to put that online. It would be a drama. So, in other words, they took the teaching of the Master Omraam, that was to change the personalities into individualities. They took all of this, controlled by personalities, to delete anything that would go against the personalities. So now the teaching of Omraam is a teaching against the personalities, highly censored by personalities, to protect their personalities. You know?
What a chaos.
Pardon?
What a chaos.
Yes. Because for everyone I speak with, it's extremely hard to understand the power, the comfort, the pleasure of being one line, individuality, personality, hands. And all of this acting the same way, giving love, being coherent, being efficient, and so on. There is a saying, God incarnates into spirits, spirit incarnates into souls, soul incarnates into egos, the ego incarnates into actions, and the actions are incarnating into the hands. When your hands are the hands of God, you are close to the great return. The great return is to go back to a state of light, of knowledge, of peace. It's a bit hard to explain now. But it's not at all a fight. It is a circle, starting from one point and going back to the same point with a great knowledge of experience and evolution. While the life of the people of today is to block completely the system where their ego is fighting the soul. It's a war. And you are the battlefield of this war. And when you become the battlefield of this war, you become a clown, a baboon, a mask, an incoherent being. And when you speak with the Master, you express, first of all, I have my free will. I will decide by myself because I have my free will. Oh yes, really? But if you have your free will, why aren't you with your soul? You know? So it's an incoherent situation and conversation. All right. That's what I wanted to present. You have anything to say? No? All right. So it will be like this for this presentation, for this chapter. Of course, the death is not the end. Far from it. And you are going to discover that if you see, but if the book is starting by the death of the Master, the other one being already ill, so the book is over. No, it's only starting. But it's starting for anyone who is able to understand that the life is the manifestation of an electrical cosmic energy manifested in matter. And as I explained, I suppose already before, the Master Peter Donov, before dying, spoke about a transformation of this electricity that is today existing in our world. There's a huge transformation. There is never an end. There is never everything based on the physical existence of somebody. There is something unlimited, coherent, powerful, full of love and light that is present with this physical body or this physical body. The death is not an end, but a beginning.